War Axe is 2 mana again. No, I'm not kidding. We're just gonna jump right into today's topic where there are a bunch of cards that are being reverted, and as you can tell by all of these tabs that I have in front of me, there are a lot of cards that we're gonna be discussing. So I'm gonna try and do this as quickly as possible. So if you guys enjoy this kind of content, feel free to like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel to be notified about any of our future updates. But the very first update that I need to give you guys is War Axe is 2 mana again. Now bring it into Standard, bring it into the core set. Give me Fiery War Axe for Warrior and Standard, and then I believe Warrior will be a 100% playable class. But with all of these cards that I'm going to be talking about, unfortunately, Standard Warrior is not getting any of them. And, well, the next card that I will be talking about is going to be a huge deal for Warrior and Wild. So, at least Wild Warriors are about to have some fun. But if you've wanted Fiery War Axe to cost 2 mana since, like, 7 years ago, I think, when this card got nerfed. 7 or 8 years ago. My god. It is finally back to what it used to be. So, Aggro Pirate Warrior and Wild is looking extremely scary. You wanna know what else is looking very scary? No. They wouldn't. They wouldn't, right? Well, guess what? They did. This card is now reverted back to what it used to be. I think as its second ability. Its very first ability, I think, was a little bit more busted because it could work with giants. But now, if you're someone who never got the chance to play Grim Patron Warrior, you now have your chance. And I never got to play this deck as comfortably or as effectively as you're supposed to if you're a top tier player. But in any case, Warsong Commander now unnerved to the point where you can play Grim Patron Warrior. And honestly, this must really talk about the state of Warrior if they're willing to unnerf Warsong Commander of all cards. So Wild Warrior players, get ready for a very wacky season. But now that you guys are thinking about Grim Patron Warrior, what are some other decks of the past that you maybe want to see play of, maybe don't want to see play of? I don't know. Some people are probably not too keen on this particular card, but the final showdown is being reverted back to draw 4 on the first part of the quest. I think this was just because of how it worked in Standard. Not too sure if Wild is going to be able to break this card all too much, but you do have Blood Boil Brute, or the Brute that's available for Demon Hunter. Ironbound Brute? Yeah, Ironbound Brute. There we go. That's the correct Brute. You can play Brute Demon Hunter now pretty effectively now that the quest has been reverted a little bit. Another Demon Hunter card is also getting reverted. Carria used to be a 6/6 and as well going back to a 6 mana 6/6 because the reason why this card got nerfed was its interaction with the Demon Hunter Colossal Minion, so you could coin this out on turn 5, transform into a copy of it, or honestly, you could just do this on turn 6 and then the Colossal Minion on turn 7, so in Standard, that was creating a few problems, but I imagine that when this rotates the Wild, it's not going to be too problematic, and you're going to see that a lot with a lot of these cards, where it's like, we know the reasons why it was nerfed in Standard, but now that they're going into Wild, it just makes sense to make them a little bit more powerful, because they're probably going to see a lot more play, such as Razormane Battle Guard. Oh my god, I literally took aggro Taunt Druid to the highest ranks possible to qualify for a Masters tournament, and I can tell you right now, this card has been unplayable since it's been nerfed. So going back to a 2/3 is a big W for Razormane Battle Guard aggro druids. Is it going to be insane and wild? It really depends on how good the aggro druid archetype is, but since they don't run pirates, maybe they can change it up a little bit, because it's just been, you know, play pirates, buff your board, and quickly hit face. Maybe now we can start running like double Greybows like we did, but I think that's still a little bit too slow. Regardless, other cards that are getting nerfed are Koldar Pack Runner. This card used to cost 2 mana and is now back down to 2 mana, because like when this card was originally released, I think Quest Hunter and other hunter archetypes, geez, try saying that twice as fast, were also really good because a lot of them played extremely cheap spells. So the card going from 2 to 3 was a pretty big deal, but it never really saw play since it got hit. Maybe now there are some hunters with like lower curves and lower cost spells that want to be able to utilize this, but again, and Wild doesn't really seem all too impactful. I still think this card is not that good at 2 mana, but let's look at some other hunter cards that are probably going to be very good. Dragon's Bane Shot, nerfed to 3, is now going back to 2 mana, so Quest might be good in Wild again, and I don't really like to support that statement, but Quest Hunter, this is definitely one card that it missed since it got nerfed, and well, it is getting its tool back. There's also there's so many changes, dude. I feel like half of these are unbelievable. But Arcanist Darngrasp is also getting reverted. It originally was changed to 2 spell damage, and since then it's been completely unplayable because there's tons of cards that don't have an entire deck you have to build around to get +2 spell damage. Now you have your +3 spell damage, so who knows if this is going to make a big enough difference. Cram Session, suddenly really good again. Being able to chain a bunch of spells, that +1 spell damage does make a big impact, especially if you're chaining a bunch of ignites. But overall, I think that this is a pretty healthy change because Quest Mage hasn't really been all too good. And this really wasn't the most oppressive of the quests. It was just extremely just streamlined and I guess predictable. It was a very predictable deck when this was popular in Standard, and I'm glad that they nerfed it when they did. But now that it's rotating off to Wild, probably fine to go ahead and change that. Another Dawngrasp that's getting changed, Magister Dawngrasp, which deals 2 damage and gains +1 honorable kill, is now going back to what it used to cost, or to a degree. It's not going back to 8 mana, but now it's dealing 2 damage and getting +2 for the honorable kill yet again. I don't know if this makes a big deal in Wild, but with Reckless Apprentice? Experimenter? Reckless Apprentice. With that card, you can still do some pretty nutty things. It's just whether or not the hero card is going to see a lot of play in a format that is very, very quick. A lot of these hero card changes feels like they have to happen. Otherwise, there's just not going to be a lot going on for these cards because they're just way too bad because they were nerfed in a metagame where they were really, really good. But now that we're going into Wild, like, there's a lot of things that can pop up, and I'm not sure if this is going to see too much play, but maybe the recast of spell might be better than I originally think. But this next card I can definitely guarantee is going into some deck to some capacity, like Tax Paladin, for example, because Convection, yep, that's right, the 2-mana card, which, oh man, I don't know if this is a good change, in all honesty. This is going to be really good with Crab Rider, because Crab Rider also got unnerfed. So Paladin is looking extremely good if they can stick a minion or 2. And if you make it to turn 5, then suddenly you just get, 6 damage for 1 mana. That is going to be extremely utilized. Like, Paladin's already kind of good in Wild as it is, at least when it comes to just, like, playing a board and then buffing it and then hopefully ending the game very, very quickly. This is just going to help Paladin all more in that department. Same thing with Level Up. You like Odd Paladin? Well, you were sad when this card got nerfed to 6 mana, but it's going right back to 5 mana. It is going back to 5 mana, so you Odd Paladin players, or if you just like playing Silverhand Recruits, you're going to be very happy with this card, because at 5 mana, it was really good because you can coin it out on 4. Suddenly, you have a lot of damage capable, as well as just like a way of being able to build up a board. This is like, I mean, it's not as powerful as Tarim by any means, because it doesn't, change your opponent's stats or anything, but you make your 1/1s into 3/3s. That's a very, very good effect, especially now that it's back at 5 mana. There's also Cold Blood. Cold Blood is going to 1 mana. I think whoever is the rogue player in the Blizzard design team really likes to utilize the cards that are good. And well, Cold Blood going back to 1 mana, maybe it'll see play in like an aggro pirate deck, because keep in mind this does fit in odd decks. Very, very scary. So Cold Blood might be making a comeback in Wild at least. I don't believe this card is coming back to Standard or anything. I don't think any of these cards are actually going to be in Standard, which again, Fiery War Axe, Blizzard, please just put it in the core set. Please just give it to us. Give Warrior this 1 W, because they definitely really freaking need it right now. Garrote, speaking of things that I don't like, and speaking about rogue players, it's going back to what it used to cost. I don't like this at all. I don't like this at all, but I'm not going to play a lot of Wild Rogue, hopefully I don't go up against too many of them, but Garrote going back to shuffling 3 instead of shuffling 2 legitimately makes this a possible card to OTK with again. It's just whether or not Rogue can consistently draw throughout their entire deck and build up the combo before dying, because this deck doesn't really do anything else. It draws its deck very quickly, does the combo, and that's pretty much it. If you can aggro it down, this deck is definitely not going to be meta relevant by any means necessary, and there's already a lot of crazy things that Rogue can do in Wild, such as Quest Rogue. But regardless, that's not where the Rogue nerfs or reverts stop, unfortunately, depending on how you view Rogue. But Evil Miscreant going back to a 1/5. I literally couldn't find a better picture, so I'm sorry for how pixelated this is. And I kind of don't understand this change either. I mean, it's not like Evil Miscreant is a bad card sitting on a 1/4, but I guess they wanted to make this card a little bit more powerful and wild, because dealing 4 damage is pretty easy compared to 5 damage. And when you have cards like Evolve Lackey, you can easily make this into like an 8/8 randomly, because there are 4 mana 8/8s. maybe this was necessary in order to make the card a little bit more playable and wild, and to help diversify things. Like, I feel like that's the biggest part of these changes, that they're really trying to diversify what is playable and wild, so that way when these new cards come out, they're not just going to be seeing the exact same meta that they were experiencing in the previous meta. So I just think that this is a quality of life for wild, and I'm definitely all for it. Although some of these cards, I'm not really particularly sure why they're getting reverted. However, this is a card that definitely needs to get reverted. Forsaken Lieutenant being at 3 mana, completely unplayable. Sadly, it's not going to stay in Standard anymore, but on the website, it still has it as a 2 mana 2/2, so this was kind of easy for me to put together. We did not forsake him. He chose to defend a tower against the entire Alliance frontline by himself. I thought for a second I could make that into a joke about how he didn't get Forsaken because he's reverted back. But regardless, I don't know how good Death Rattle is in Wild. I mean, there is stuff with Mine that is possible, but the good Mine deck doesn't even really care about Forsaken Lieutenant and wants less minions to play in it. Because the whole point of the deck is to play Snowfall Graveyard, and then you could do stuff with Terran in order to get a bunch of value and a bunch of bombs. So it's like Forsaken Lieutenant really just doesn't help out that game plan. So whether or not this card makes a difference in Wild, not all too sure about that. Although I just have to make this note, I would love to see this card come back in Standard. Just saying, I would love to see this card continue and stay in Standard. But as an Alterac Valley card, it is definitely going, unfortunately. And now we have another questline change. Command the Elements. I believe it's the last part of the quest. Yeah, Tame the Flames is play 3 cards with Overload. I think it's the only part of the card that they changed. Maybe they changed both of these where it used to be 2 and 2, but now they're both 3. Well, the last part of the quest is going back to what it was originally. Play 2 cards with Overload, and then you get the Stormcaller Burkhan. I feel like in Wild, this does have actual capability because there are insane capabilities with Spirit of the Frog. So there's lots of card draw combos that you can do, and getting this out as early as you can is probably not too uncommon. The only thing I am worried about is Lightning Bloom. Lightning Bloom used to be like the bread and butter to put this deck together, so that way you could gain mana and then not have to worry about the overloaded mana crystals. However, now that it just refreshes mana, it's probably not going to be as insane, but it's probably going to still see play in the deck no matter what, just because it's a mana cheat card and it does fulfill the overload requirement. And next up, we have Granite Forgeborn, which is going back to a 4/5. I really don't understand why this card was made a 4/5 in the beginning, because a 4-mana 4/4 seems insane for this kind of ability. But, I mean, let's be honest. Elemental Shaman is not seeing a bunch of play right now, so this being ticked up by 1 HP really is not going to make that big of a difference. It's just going to make more people inclined to try and make this archetype work. So, big W for Elemental Shaman, since one of its best mana cheat cards is now slightly better. And now we've got the Demon Seed. Okay, these next 2 cards you guys are going to not believe the changes that they're making. They are completely reworking the Demon Seed, and I don't even have a picture to be able to pull up to talk about this card, so I had to make it myself. This is very simply what it is. The Demon Seed is now going to be, it's still going to be a quest line. It's also going to be playable in Wild. I probably should have led with that. This card is now unnerfed, unbanned, or I'm sorry, it is now unbanned in Wild. It's definitely not unnerfed. But now this is what it does. It now, every single part of the quest, you have to deal 10 damage to your hero. Every single step. First step, 10 damage. Second step, 10 damage. Third step, 10 damage, and then you can finally get the payoff of your fatigue. And now that is a balanced way to make the Demon Seed actually playable and not completely oppressive, to where you play 1/1 drop and it completes the first step of the quest. And I have to play 2 1-drops, so we'll see how good this card is. I think that the dealing 30 to yourself really incentivizes healing, but this card still has natural healing attached to it, so we'll see exactly how this works. But Demon Seed being playable in Wild, this was definitely not on my bingo book, and I don't think it was on anybody's bingo book. And S+ to me for making this card art, because I think I did a really good job. I tried to make as many details pop up here as possible, and well, my dragon is just absolutely beautiful, isn't it? But this isn't even the most insane change that has happened. No, this is not the most insane change. Stealer Souls, coming back to Wild. However, not in the way that you believe. Not in the way that you are assuming. I had to use it. I decided to just use this because it was the easiest way to get my point across. But it is now going back to 4 mana. However, the first card you draw each turn costs health instead of mana. The first card you draw It's not the first card you play. First card you draw. I don't know if this is a good card anymore. Even at 6 mana, it still had like the capability of doing like insane mana cheat turns if you had like your hero immune or something like that. And I believe they rechanged how immune works with taking damage depending on what the card text says. But regardless, Steal Your Soul's going to the first card you draw every single turn. If you were to play the card that draws demons, and I think it discounts them by 2 as well. I might be making up that last part. But if you could somehow like mana cheat this, play it cheaper, and then like get a free card draw, it really just depends on what card you get and what you're trying to accomplish. Like, say for example, you tutor out a specific card, like the highest cost card in your deck or something like that, and it does something insane. But I feel like someone smarter is gonna have to break Steal Your Souls for me, because the first card you draw really limits what this card can do. Maybe now you can only play this when you're setting up like a Mechathune combo, so that way you can play Mechathune into something else. But again, that's a hell of a setup, dude. There are a lot of really cool potential combos you can do with this, but if you don't hit it on the first card, it's gonna be a little bit unpredictable on whether or not this card is going to see play or not. And speaking of cards that never saw play, Mushan Watchpost is going back from a 3-4 back to a 3-5. Does this card see much play afterwards? I really doubt it, but I mean, hey, they're making this card a little bit better. And luckily they didn't unnerf the other Watchpost, because my lord, if that was still a 2-5, I don't know how I'd feel about it. It was a 2-4, right? Yeah, the first Watchpost was a 2-4. But in any case, I really don't think this buff is really all too important. It's just a card they happen to buff. However, Ice Revenant is going to be a good card because they preemptively nerfed this card because of its interactions with Frost DK. Well, now they're taking away that interaction to where this card is going to be +2/+2 again. And the only thing that I can really think of is that on turn 3 or on turn 4, if you happen to coin this out, and then have a bunch of Horn of Winters in combination with this card, then maybe you can do something similar to what Rogue does by playing this gigantic minion that your opponent can't clear. But I feel like we've understood, especially during this meta with how broken Sinstone is vanilla stats by themselves are not the most game-breaking thing in the world. It's about how early they can come out, and this can come out as early as turn 3, so there is that going for it. But Big Game Hunter, I don't know about you guys, but I got a feeling that Big Game Hunter is coming back because Dr. Boom is coming back and Ragnaros is coming back. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of removal for minions that are really large. So it's probably why they felt good doing this. But also, like, this card just didn't see play regardless, and they still nerfed it. And, well, here's the thing as well. This card is rotating out to Wild, so it's like the only way to really get value out of it in Wild Frost Death Knight is to still do Horn of Winter plays, and there's definitely lots of ways for Wild players to deal with gigantic minions. So I kind of wish this card was available in Standard, so that way we could have had some fun with it, and then if it was still like super busted, go ahead and give it the axe. But I'm just really sad that as a Death Knight player, I couldn't make use of this card, because it would have been fun just to play gigantic big minions that your opponent can't clear. And well, speaking of big minions that your opponent can't clear, I don't know why this card is coming back either, but someone really wants Galakron Rogue to go back to its former glory days, I guess. Because this is like what I'm seeing with a lot of these Rise of League of Evil, Rise of Legends, Rise of Shadow. I'm screwing up my expansion names right now, but this card is going back to a 5-4. It's still super busted, and the whole reason why this card was nerfed was because it was a super good neutral card in order to dominate the mid game. If you had any minion that was on the field, like Lackeys, for example, Galakron Rogue is probably coming back. Then this was just the ultimate synergy that went with it. 5 damage trading into minions is going to get a lot of value trades versus 4. So I think this card is definitely coming back in Wild if there's a deck that cares too much. Pretty much if there's Galakron Rogue. If Galakron Rogue is coming back, then I feel like we're going to see this card come back 100% for sure. But Wild is a very unpredictable, aggressive beast. And speaking of Powerhouse Reverts, they're definitely unnerfing Goldshire Null because this card being at 11 mana is just not fair. One thing to keep in mind, though, about Wild is that Wild does have 11 mana combos, so this isn't going to work like it did in Standard, to where you transform your Goldshire Null into something that costs 1 or more mana, and then it just evolves into a 10-drop. There are 11-drop minions that are available in Wild, so if you have an Evolve Shaman, high roll that you want to hit, keep in mind that you only have so many 11 drops to choose from. I'm sorry, I should apologize. I said there are many minions that are 11 mana, but there's actually only one minion that is 11 mana, and it's the Shaman Snow Fury Giant. So if you want to play Goldshire Knoll, evolve it into an 8/8 with pretty much nothing else going for it, that is what's available in Wild right now. So Goldshire Knoll is definitely not reliving its old glory days, going back to 10 mana. It's just giving Evolved Shaman, I guess, another way of being able to play cheap 8/8s if you have that setup already going for you. But Goldshire Knoll is definitely not reliving his glory days in Wild like he was in Standard. And one of the last reverts that we have to look forward to is Pandaren Importer. This card has quite literally been nerfed because of how it worked with Rogue for so long. The whole reason being that if you jam your deck full of spells that aren't Shadow Step, then you can play this card and generate infinite Shadow Steps. And at 2 mana, that just definitely was not a possibility. Also, I don't know what's going on with here and it losing its little Jade Idol little thingy. Maybe they sold it, you know, they sold it for a good profit. But regardless, this card is going back to 2 mana, and it is very sad that this was one of the coolest Discover cards that was playable, but an entire class, of course Rogue, was the class that made this unfortunately too broken in the one class that it would have saw some play in. I would love for them just to keep this card in Standard, just so that way we have ways of being able to utilize it. But then we're gonna have the exact same issue where Shadow Step is still in core, so this card is still gonna get broken in Rogue. So I don't know. I really think it should say a lot about the class in question if it completely delegitimizes one card for one specific use. Like, I don't know. I'm pretty much just trying to say that Rogue is broken, and I wish there were other ways that other classes could be as broken as Rogue, because it's always Rogue doing these things that are, you know, making these cards completely unplayable or completely broken. But there you have it. Those are all of the changes that are coming to Hearthstone as of today on April 4th. But thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. I am extremely excited about these warrior changes because I want to be able to play Patient Warrior again. And who knows, that might be one of the first things that I do on the first day of the new expansion, just because I love Grim Patient Warrior. But aside from that, there's a whole bunch of new cards that I'm going to be looking over these next couple of days in order to decide how exactly we're going to utilize them to the best degree. And if you want to see these cards in action, I will be participating in the Theorycraft stream, so make sure you guys check out twitch.tv/ClarkHellScream in order to make sure that you're there when I go live with that, because we'll be streaming from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. PST? Pacific time. Yeah, 9 to 3 Pacific time. And, well, we're going to have a lot of fun playing with these new cards. So I hope you guys enjoyed these reverts. Hopefully this gets your gears turning on what might be possible in the Wild format. And we'll see you for the next video.